Okay, so what I'm going to demonstrate for you today is how to install the web version of OpenDroneMap. And in particular, I'm going to show you how to do the install on Windows. I'm on Windows 11, though this should also work for Windows 10. If you're using some other type of operating system, like on a Mac or Linux, the installation will be a little bit different, though it shouldn't be as complicated as it seems. One thing that you should know is OpenDroneMap is free. It is open source. By free, I mean it's being supported by a community that donates their time and their expertise to make this work. And when you actually realize how great of a piece of software this is, you'll want to support them in whatever way you want. If installation is daunting to you, I would highly recommend that you actually go ahead and when you go into your WebODM here off of the main page and you go to download, there are options on here to purchase an installer at the given price right here based on whether or not you're standard or business. And if you start comparing other commercial-based softwares that do similar things, this is a very inexpensive way to go, and it supports the project. So if you're uncomfortable with installation and using Git and Docker and things like that, then I would highly recommend just spending, if you're a person, just a $57 one-time installation, or if you're a business, the $147, because really it's not that much compared to what you'd be paying for some other type of commercial software. Often those things range in hundreds of dollars per month. The other difference that you should know is because this is open source, there's not going to be very much support for you on the other end, though there are several good videos out there. The user interface is a little bit more or a little less intuitive, but if you're already accustomed to doing this type of processing for orthomosaics, DEMs, or any other type of aerial imagery processing, it's going to be pretty straightforward. There's also good documentation out there and a good community to support you. Okay, so let's get right to this and figure out what we need to do. So obviously you need to be on the WebODM website to get the process or to get the software that you're going to need. And this employs a couple different tools to make this happen. So when you click on download, provided you're not going to be using the installer that you can purchase, you're going to go ahead and go to GitHub. And GitHub is basically a place, it's a repository for this type of software, allows it to be copied and branched. It's very popular amongst open source developers. So if you want to get right down to the code of things, this is typically where you go. And it does look a bit intimidating because you can see things are down to their very base level. The nice thing is if you scroll a little bit further, it opens up the README, right? So that's kind of the document which is going to direct you into the information you need to do the install. This also highlights some of the things that they can do with this software, some things you can do with the software. There is also just a command line version of ODM that was the original development that you can also download and use. But the WebODM interface is really nice and it's relatively simple once you get it installed. Okay, so you're going to need a couple things to get started, and if you just click on the GitHub and go to the README down here, it's going to have three of these things highlighted. The two that you're going to need are Git and Docker. So Git is going to allow you to pull the files off of GitHub onto your local machine. And so if you click on that, it takes you right to the download page. Right now we're on 2.40.0. Just get whatever is the most current and stable version of that and use the download to get that. As you can see down here, I have already downloaded that on here to save some time. Once you have Git, then you're going to need also Docker. So if you are back here on the GitHub page on the README, you will see that there is Docker, and you're going to go ahead and get Docker desktop. Okay, and again, I've seen other tutorials that indicate to get an older version. I've not had any problems with using the latest stable version, so I would just go ahead and use this main link here and download that. Again, you can see that I've downloaded that here. So I'm going to go ahead and install Git first. Of course, you're going to need administrative privileges to make this work, and use the defaults. And there are a lot of defaults you need to go through. So once you've done that, it's going to go ahead and run through this install. And depending on your processor and mostly your hard drive, whether or not you're running on a solid state, will depend on how quickly this process can happen. I'm probably going to go ahead and pause the video here while I do the rest of this install of Git. Okay, now that I've got Git installed, I'm going to go ahead and unclick this release notes and hit finish. I don't need to launch it yet. And now that I've got Git installed, I'm going to go ahead and install Docker Desktop. And again, I will probably go ahead and pause this installation because it will take a few minutes to do that. When you're doing the install of Docker, go ahead and use the defaults for these things. A shortcut to the desktop is not going to hurt because we're going to turn off the startup for Docker, so we're not utilizing those resources when we don't need to. So one thing I should mention here is that when you're doing your downloads for any of these, either Docker or Git, if you're given an option between a 32-bit and a 64-bit option, hopefully you're running on a 64-bit machine. If you're still running on a 32-bit machine, you can probably run some of these things, but it's going to be pretty tricky, so I don't think it is recommended. So hopefully you're downloading 64-bit based software. So if you're given that option, make sure you select that. That is also one of the major differences between commercially based software packages like Drone Deploy or Pix4D, where they're doing the processing in the cloud using their processors. Here you're doing it locally on your machine. Okay, another thing is when you have Docker, or when you download Docker, you will have to restart your machine. And when you get to this point and it's asking for a server screen, go ahead and hit accept. You're probably at some point, oh, that's new. Update the WS kernel by running WSL update. Okay, well, I guess we will run that update. Okay, so when I try to run Docker after doing the install, I hadn't seen this before, it's going to require me to do an update of the Linux kernel for Windows. And so I've followed the link, and you can see this is the error I've gotten. So I'm going to try to see if I can just from the PowerShell. So I've basically just gone down to the start, typed in PowerShell to get here. So I'm going to do WSL --update, and I'm going to allow it to do that. And that looks like it's probably going to go ahead and fix the issue. So if you come across that, do not be dismayed. All you need to do is go ahead and run that update. So again, I'm going to go ahead and pause the video while it does this update because I have no idea how long this is going to take. Okay, so as you can see here, I was successful in doing that update. So again, if you see that pop up when you try to run Docker, all you need to do is update that kernel. And how I did that was I came to my start menu, which is not going to show up on my screen recorder, and I just typed in PowerShell. You'll see PowerShell come up on here. And again, you've got to have administrative privileges. Type that WSL --update, which is exactly what it's indicating here, what I need to do. So if I did that right, I should be able to get out of my PowerShell, quit that, and I should be ready to go with Docker. Okay, the other thing that you need to recognize is that Docker is going to require a sign-in. So you're going to have to get started. You're going to have to create an account. It's not a big deal. It doesn't cost anything. That's going to allow you to run essentially a virtual machine, because the way that WebODM is encapsulated, or the way it runs, is sort of within the Docker environment. So yeah, go ahead and make yourself an account. Write down your username and your password so you don't forget it, and you're ready to go. Okay, so I am going to go back to here. I'm going to pull this aside. Okay, Docker's closed, good. Okay, and what I'm going to need to do now is follow the instructions from the Git page. So I'm going to go back to the Git page here. And if I go down here to the README again, I've got to get just past where it tells me what I need to install. And there's a few commands I'm going to have to run. So you're going to need to open up your Git bash shell. So if you're familiar with Linux, you'll know what that is. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my bash shell. And from here, I'm going to go ahead and copy, right-click and copy that first line that I need to run from my shell, and I'm going to paste that there, as opposed to trying to type it, though when I did this on other machines I had to type it. I can get that to work. Now if you've run into a problem where ODM has been installed before and failed, you're probably not going to get back past this step without it telling you that, hey, it's already installed on here, because it's probably already tried to create a place for that on your machine, and it's not going to want to overwrite that. So there's probably more than one workaround on that. The way I would solve that issue, while this is installing, I'll just open up a notepad. Okay, well, actually, what it'll look like, so if I type in ls, that's going to give me a list of all the directories that are on here, and here you can see WebODM is installed. So if you had previously tried to install WebODM and it didn't work, just use the rm-r, which is recursive remove, and if you type your capital W-E, E-B, and then you can hit tab, it'll finalize that, or you can type WebODM like that out, but it has to be exactly like that. And then once you hit enter, it'll probably ask you to verify that you want to completely remove that. Go ahead and remove that, and then do your clean install by copying and pasting that first line in there. But we're not going to go ahead and remove it. We had a successful install. So now I'm going to cd or change directory to WebODM. Okay, and then I'm going to do I'm just following what's going on here, right? You can track what I'm doing. If you're comfortable just copying and pasting, doing that's fine. I'm on the third line here, where I'm going to go into the current directory, and I'm going to go ahead and start WebODM, the shell script, and start. Okay, and that's going to go ahead and do some checks. Looks like I got an error because of something going on with Docker. Okay, so I'm going to get that troubleshot, and then I'll be back. Okay, so what it was, and if I would have just taken a second and looked at the error it was giving me, it basically said, oh, hey, Docker is not running. So because I had to install or update the Linux kernel for Windows, it made it so Docker was not started. So I need to go ahead and get Docker desktop going, which it probably already is, and there I am. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and sign in. I'm going to just move this off here. Okay, it'll take you to the web page for sign in. Once you've got that signed in, one thing I am going to recommend, if you're given the option, install the disk usage extension, because you're going to be caching a lot of things while you're doing this processing, and if you've got limited space on your hard drive, you're going to be able to clean that up, because as it runs within that environment, it's caching and storing things, and later you're going to be able to get rid of those when you don't need them. Okay, so you can kind of see how that's going to work. Here's my containers. Now I'm going to go ahead and minimize Docker. I need that to be open and running. I'm going to bring back all this fun stuff. Okay, so now I can go back to the try to start my WebODM. So if things started correctly, it should take you right to Docker if you had Docker open, but here you're getting to see exactly how that works. So I'm going to I hit the up arrow here in my shell, and you can see I've got that WebODM shell script, and I'm going to hit start, and now it's actually working like I expect it to. So there are, I think there's about, on the current version, there's about 549 megabytes of things it's going to need to download and unpack. It does take a few minutes, so sit back and relax while that's getting done, and I will start this video back up once that's complete. Okay, if you got to this part, success. You have successfully installed WebODM, and you now have it running within its Docker container on your desktop. And so I'm going to go ahead and minimize my Git bash here. I'm going to go ahead and minimize this also to show you in Docker desktop that this should be running. So you can see here's your WebODM running right here. So there's an instance there. You can always stop it from here just by clicking that. So you've got all that control. So when you come back later, you should be able to start up WebODM just from using Docker instead of going into your GitHub bash. Okay, so now that you're running, I'm going to go back to the web page here. It'll tell you that, hey, you now need to go to your localhost 8000, because again, this is running locally on your machine. So I'm just going to open up a new tab, and I should be able to copy and paste that. It wants me to go ahead and sign in to my Docker. Again, I'm going to move that off the screen. Okay, and now once I've got that running, I now have my WebODM up and running. They've got a first project on here already installed, but you're ready to go at this point. So hopefully you saw some of the issues that can come up. Some of those were unexpected, like the Linux kernel update I hadn't seen because I was running it on a Windows 10 machine before, and the other issue was Docker was not running when I needed it to be running. So hopefully you saw a few issues come up that might help you. Also, if you've got the problem where you've tried to install WebODM before, how to fix that if it wasn't a clean install. Afterwards, it's pretty easy to update. In fact, I think on the web page itself, it tells you how to do the update, which is right here. So you'll go ahead and do that from your Git bash shell, and you'll just go ahead and get into that WebODM folder by using that cd WebODM, and then do the ./WebODM.sh update, and that should get you up to the latest version. So hopefully that helps you, and if you got any questions, let me know.